Does this location look familiar? What about this one? Or this one? Or even this one? One of the best parts about Fortnite's maps are the unnamed locations, the smaller, lesser known spots. Even though they weren't all that large or had as much loot as the named POIs, Epic still made them just as unique in their own ways. So today we're going to be talking about some of the coolest unnamed locations and smaller POIs in the earlier days of Chapter 1 of Fortnite Battle Royale. Why don't we start off with the one in the thumbnail, this house right here. Now I believe most people either called it Architect House or Edited House, but usually when it comes to unnamed locations, people had their own different names for them. This house was located at the very top right of the map, just north of Wailing Woods. It was just a normal house, but it had lots of random builds on top of it that were edited. A few weeks ago I was doing research for a video when I saw this house and I was like, no way, I remember this. But let's continue on to some other obscure locations from Chapter 1. Also, in the northeastern portion of the map, we have these other few houses that were just kinda there. Not much to them honestly, but who remembers what was here before Risky Reels was added? Well, before Risky Reels there was actually just some little farmland there, and honestly it had basically no loot at all. And not too far from it there was this bridge that led right over to Anarchy Acres, or Lazy Links depending on the season. The northeastern portion of the map was honestly pretty desolate. Even if you include Wailing Woods, you would still find that not many people landed here or even traveled to this area at all. But I think it's a really cool and nostalgic area for many players for that very reason. If you continue to move west from Anarchy Acres, then you would run into the Umbrella Mine. It didn't really have any loot, but it was really cool to see something like this in the game, especially since you could see it from the map. Not too far from it though was the Motel. Now, this is one of my personal all-time favorite drop spots. It had good loot if you went as a solo or duo, and many times you would be landing there completely alone. Honestly, I was pretty sad to see this one go. But let's keep moving west and we'll run into the little broken area right here. For whatever reason, me and my friends simply called this location Broken. I don't know why, but that's what we called it. It was added in Season 2 and ended up being removed after just 2 seasons. However, a lot of people may know, this location actually is the ruins of Starry Suburbs, which would be added in Season X. I feel like the same principle goes for this location as well as Motel. It had decent loot for solo or duo, but not really any more than that. If we make our way south and go down past Pleasant Park, then we would run into this mountain with the 3 ramps going off of it. This location is actually named Stunt Mountain, which I myself didn't know until researching for this video. It actually spawned shopping carts up here whenever they were added, and of course, what else would people do other than just take them straight off the ramps? While not really being a good location at all, this was somewhere you could drop if you just wanted to have some fun and fly off the mountain on the shopping cart. Go a little south and you would end up at the soccer stadium. I feel like this one is up there with some of the most loved locations. It had decent loot for a solo or a duo, and it was kind of fun to go inside and kick the soccer ball around for a little while. Who remembers when Fearless would go here and try to play soccer with random players?
You're missing the wall. There you go. Come on. All right, let's go. Let's go. What are you doing? What are you doing?
There was also somewhere in this area you would run into this house right here. I personally remember coming across this house very few times, and for some reason it just felt very secluded, and I'm not really sure why. If you continue to move south, you would run into this location that had the huge chair. And actually this chair was there in Season 1 before any of the buildings got added there with it. Somewhere in this area you also had this huge tree. I never came up with a name for it myself, but I believe during the OG seasons, this was actually the only tree in the game that gave you 100 wood if you broke it completely. But let me know if I got that right in the comments. If we move on east, we'll see Fatal Fields. But we're not talking about Fatal Fields itself because that's a named location, of course. We're talking about the little woods that it had next to it, usually having a chest and some ground loot, and of course you would be able to farm lots of wood from it. Keep on going and you would run into none other than the prison. This is one of the most loved unnamed locations in the history of Battle Royale. Everyone knew this location and everyone loved it. It had decent loot, nothing crazy, but everyone just loved it for whatever reason. I think that's just the nature of Fortnite, honestly. Even with the more recent chapters, there's just something about different locations that, while they can be very simple, they can still be loved by so many players. Not all that far from the prison though, we had a location I think takes the cake as the most loved unnamed location in the history of Battle Royale, and that would be the OG factories. This place had plenty of loot for solos and duos, and I'd argue that you could even drop here as a squad and everyone have decent loot. From here you could rotate pretty much anywhere you wanted because it was surrounded by bigger locations being Retail Row, Dusty Depot, Salty Springs, and it wasn't too far from Tilted Towers. And I think it just comes down to the same thing being something about people loving the most simple locations for whatever reason. We can be honest here, the OG factories is honestly just a smaller version of Flesh Factory, but we can all agree that this location is legendary. Not too far west of OG Factory, you had Salty Tower. This mountain is very iconic to many players, and I think the main reason was because it was so close to the middle of the map, meaning people would see this or travel to it a lot. I personally remember myself spending lots of time at this mountain for whatever reason. It just has a really cool and weird shape, and it fits in perfectly with Fortnite. Moving east from OG Factories and going past Retail Row, you would run into the RV park, and honestly this was a pretty good location as well. You could definitely get some decent loot as a solo or a duo, and you could rotate straight into Retail Row and clean everything up. This one doesn't get talked about nearly as much as other spots, but I think it deserves its respect. The next location is one that I feel like a lot more people know, which is the racetrack. Who remembers its glory days when it was just a dirt track with a house? Call me crazy, but in my opinion this one is a lot cooler than the revamped version that was introduced in chapter 5 that turned it into an actual racetrack. But honestly, the new racetrack was a good location and we can't lie about that. It was pretty fun to race your friends around using the carts, but honestly I don't think anything can beat the OG racetrack. Moving north, we have this mansion right here next to Lonely Lodge that was introduced in season 4, and honestly it's in the perfect spot too because this place was even lonelier than Lonely Lodge. But I think we can agree that while it wasn't the best drop spot, it was a pretty cool one. It was a large mansion with a garden and a secret lair in the basement, and it even had a little garden in the back that kind of hung off the edge of the map. And it was also home to this iconic Fortnite clip.
There you go, man.
Are you gonna get it? You gotta get it. No, he was only one!
And the final location we have is the container yard. It had an abundance of metal to farm and it had decent loot as well, even for a full squad. This was a go-to spot for me back in seasons 1 and 2, and me and my friends would go here and farm up max metal, but it would end up being for no reason since we didn't even used to build back then, and neither did really anybody else. And I just wanted to throw this in there. I was finally able to find a good quality photo of the pre-season map. I wish I could have found this a couple weeks ago, but apparently I wasn't looking hard enough. Anyways, you can see that Dusty Depot, Tomato Town, and Salty Springs were all unnamed locations, which is just something that's really cool to me, honestly. Anyways, with that being said, we just went over many of the unnamed locations from the earlier days of Chapter 1. I don't think we covered anything past season 5, so if there are some locations past that time frame that you want me to talk about, let me know down in the comments because I would love to continue this series and go down the timeline looking back at these locations. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to hit those like and subscribe buttons and maybe turn on post notifications if you want to be notified when I post more videos like this. And always, I hope you guys have a blessed day. Okay, hear me out. I know I miss Grandma's house, okay? But after I finished editing the video completely, I just happened to remember. I'm sorry.